going to be in abundance, things are going to be free, but things have to be responsible. So this session, we're going to not talk about returns, but also about impact, judging responsible AI, making it scalable, inclusive, especially in developing nations and fast-growing markets like India and the global South. So this is of keen importance to this panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have each one of them kind of start with opening remarks. They need no introduction. They're all leaders in their industry, in their venture capital firms. But I want them to kind of remark a little bit on what they're doing today and what their firms are doing today. So we'll start with Abhishek at that far end.
Okay. Hey, thank you, MR, and thanks for having me here. My name is Abhishek Shukla. I'm the Managing Director for Prosperity 7. I won't go through the introduction, but yeah, responsible AI is a very timely topic. And as we think about this as venture capitalists, we look at investing in lasting companies, which will give us lasting returns. And to me, these two things are very interconnected. It's the higher the technical mode, the better the technology. The consequences of creating financial returns are also connected with that opportunity. And I think it's both sides of the same coin, and that's how we look at it.
Neeraj?
So, at General Catalyst, I think we have two theses when we look at responsible AI. One is global resilience, and the other one is applied AI. So when we invest in AI tools and infra and models and companies, we don't only look at the technology that is powering those tools. We look at how does those technologies and products apply and modernize critical industries like defense, healthcare, manufacturing, and enterprises. Right? So when you look at from that lens, it is imperative you not only look at what do they do in those industries, but how do those industries get impacted over a long term, right? So as Abhishek said, it goes hand in hand. It is important that these industries are getting modernized, not only in the US, but in Europe and India as well, right? So each geography will have its own needs, its own requirements, how these industries are changing, and how does AI apply very responsibly in these sectors, in these geographies. So I think for us, it's very important that we don't only look at investing in the next cool, hyped up, best technology that AI is going to build, but also how does that product and technology apply in these sectors, critical sectors, and how does it modernize those sectors?
Sumir?
Yeah, firstly, thank you to the Consul General for his leadership in organizing this wonderful event, and MR, thank you for bringing this amazing panel together. I want to first just give a little backdrop on how we're looking at AI. We are super positive on the AI wave. We think it's going to be transformational over the next decade for all of us here in this room and beyond. And so we have been very aggressively making a lot of AI investments. We've invested a few $100 million just in the last few months in 5 or 6 really exciting companies like Udly, like Unify Apps, like NextHop, many others, and up and down the AI infrastructure layer. And I want to echo what Neeraj said in that we really look at how AI impacts different industries very carefully and thoughtfully, because there are a lot of unknowns today. We're really in kind of a brave new world, and even the quote-unquote experts are not really sure of how things will evolve. So we really think a lot first principles, look at industries and how they might get impacted, think hard about them. And I'll add one last thing before I hand off here, MR, which is, from a responsible AI perspective, I think all of us as Americans, one of our responsibilities is to make sure that America wins the AI race, because if another country like China wins the AI race, we're all in trouble, in my opinion. So I think the most important thing to do is to make sure that we're ahead, and here all of us in Silicon Valley can play a big role investing in these companies, helping them grow scale, as well as in India. But I think that, to me, is going to be really important for the future, and all of us can play a part in that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sumir. Arun, over to you.
Some great points have been made by the previous panelists, and I agree with all the points made. I will just pick a few areas and illustrate some of them with what we do at Celesta Capital. So we see, as was mentioned, a huge wave of opportunity in AI. And many of us have already been playing in that space. So in our case, we are focused on the deep tech aspects of it, starting from, if you might, the metal, which might be semiconductors, going up through infrastructure and applications. And there we see three broad areas: semiconductors and advanced manufacturing, AI infrastructure, and then the convergence of biotech and computer science, which we call bioconvergence. Again, an area of great importance and increasing importance with the advance of AI. We follow the same thesis in India, which is where I'm really focused. And our goal there is to develop some world-class, highly competitive companies out of India and leverage the US-India corridor. So as Sumir mentioned, it's really important for the US to lead in AI. And I actually believe the US can lead in AI with a lot of synergy with India. So the US-India connection in AI can be extremely powerful. And you'll see that the amount of talent that India can bring to bear working with the US can be great. I think the trust initiative was mentioned by one of the speakers earlier. All of this also nicely dovetails into the US-India relationship and where that is going. I want to also mention one more initiative, which I and some other folks in the room are involved in. It's called the India Deep Tech Investment Initiative. So this is an initiative where a bunch of venture capital firms have come together to commit significant investments in deep tech. And all deep tech today includes AI pretty much in India over the next few years. And this complements the Government of India's Research, Development and Innovation Fund, which was also mentioned today. So the idea here is that we put a big push behind AI with capital. A number of companies like NVIDIA and Qualcomm have joined this deep tech investment initiative. And we plan to work with the AI mission so that when this conference is held in February, we would love to be active participants in that.
Great, thanks. Over to you, Surya.
Thanks. So yeah, I'm a professor at Stanford, but also a venture partner at General Catalyst. I'll stick to the more academic side and just to kind of remind you that there's incredible need for public investment in long horizon fundamental research to advance AI. And a lot of that fundamental research is upstream of startup success. So for example, the first diffusion model was actually invented in my lab, and we were thinking about how to reverse the second law of thermodynamics and build structure from noise, a very esoteric physics problem. We were able to do it by replacing the laws of physics with a neural network, and we could create images from noise. And that got picked up by industry eventually and scaled up, and now it powers things like Sora and generative AI, which is delivering a lot of economic returns in society at the moment. Now, we're going to need several more of those types of breakthroughs going forward. Otherwise, we're going to be leaving performance gains on the table for AI. Just two numbers out there, like AI is much more data hungry and much more energy hungry than biological intelligence, right? AIs need 10 trillion words to train on. We only need 100 million. That's 5 orders of magnitude more. AI needs megawatts to train. Our brain only needs 20 watts. Again, more than 5 orders of magnitude more. So we're working on better data efficiency, better energy efficiency, and so forth. Also, the coupling of AI with fundamental science is incredibly exciting. AI will have a huge impact on biotechnology, on disease discovery, disease solutions, and so forth. But also, I work in neuroscience, and so we can now, for example, build digital twins of the brain and do rapid in silico experiments on these digital twins in a way that we can't do in actual animals, and then test the hypotheses generated by these experiments on actual animals. And therefore, we can accelerate the pace of neuroscience discovery to the point where we can take only months to discover what took decades before, right? And so I'm incredibly bullish on cracking the hardest diseases out there, which are neurodegenerative diseases, by turning AI back on the brain as a lens to understand how it works. And we're actually building like a focused research organization to do that, where we're building an entire digital twin of the primate visual system based on philanthropy and investment from the private sector. And we're going to be building new types of AI inspired by the efficiency of the primate brain. And that could lead to spin-offs later on. So this kind of pathway from academia to focused research to startup, we can't break that pathway. If we do, we'll break it at our peril. We won't see the next few exponentials coming up based on fundamental science.
Thanks, Surya. I have some specific questions for each one of the panelists. I will start with Sumir. You've done lots of these investments, you said, on AI and such. So how do you see the Indian market? What is the adoption of AI? What kind of investments are you making specific to India? And what do you think of the landscape there?
Yeah, definitely, MR. On the India side, we have 55 investments. We've invested $7 billion, and it's our biggest investment area. And I'd say that's overall at a firm level. In terms of AI, we made several investments, including all the ones I mentioned have a strong India presence. But India tends to be more the center for R&D, and they're serving more the US market because it's bigger. So we're seeing really mostly companies like that, MR, that we invest in, sort of US-India companies, I would say. India itself isn't as sophisticated in AI yet. It will come, and I think it's evolving fast. What we are seeing is all our Indian companies are using AI very aggressively. So they're rapid adopters, but I would say more as users. And so for them, cost matters a lot. And so, for example, we're seeing situations where a company that might have had 100 employees now maybe only has 60, and can get the same work done, whether it's improvement in coding productivity or marketing productivity by sort of leveraging AI tools. So we're seeing a lot of that. The other thing that I think is interesting is AI now, India now has the second largest number of AI users in the world after the US, and it will overtake the US in the next 2-3 years. So I think in terms of, now admittedly, very few of those users are actually paying for it. So it's free users to confess, but I think the sort of AI fluency is going to be higher in India than anywhere in the world in terms of the largest user base in the world next 2-3 years. And you've heard folks like Sam Altman talk about that when he visited India, other folks. So I think that's sort of a very interesting trend that I think what will result in is a lot of Indian consumers will be more AI facile than consumers anywhere else in the world. So one thing we could see over time is even the way we interact with, say, booking travel, or the way we interact with doing all the things we do online today could be much more AI first in India before it is in other countries. Just because the user base is adopting AI much faster than anywhere else. So I would say that's one interesting trend we're sort of watching, MR.
Great, thank you. Neeraj, you were a core part of the WhatsApp team, and WhatsApp has scaled, especially in India, more than any other country, right? So what's the tension between moving fast and scaling to now you have to be more responsible, more equitable, more inclusive? What is your opinion on that segment?
I think even though WhatsApp grew really fast and India became the biggest market very quickly, the ethos was always about making sure anything we do in WhatsApp is actually for the benefit of the user, right? If you really look at the product over the last 15 years it has existed, it hasn't really changed that much, right? Even when we were there from 2009 when it got started to 2018 when the founders and I left, the product didn't really change. It just got better every day. And I think that's how we think about responsibility as well here, right? So you invest in really good technologies and products and help them diffuse and help change and modernize the industries we are in. But it has to be done in a thoughtful way and in a way that it actually benefits the end user, right? It is less about how fast. Everybody wants to grow fast and become really big. Obviously, that's how capitalism works. That's how all of us investors think about most of our companies. But end of the day, it has to serve somebody, either an industry or a user or an enterprise, right? So if you want to grow, I think the core of that growth should be whether it is in the service of your end user. So that's how I think about it.
Got it. Arun, coming to you, you've been in the US administration before. You have been the CEO of KPMG India in the past, and now you're a venture capitalist. So what are the gaps you see between US and India in terms of policy, in terms of investments? Can you opine on that?
Yeah, so let me just go back to my time in the US Department of Commerce. And I won't make my comments very India-specific, but I do see opportunities in the US-India area. So back in 2014, when I was in the US Department of Commerce, we had a number of issues about data privacy globally. The European Union had gone a certain direction. The US was falling behind. There were huge gaps. The question on whether banks can operate globally because they have access to all kinds of data and they should know where the data is, et cetera, et cetera. So in that, what we found was, and I think this is where I would take some lessons. One is that governments often don't have enough capability. They don't often have the technical capacity to understand all the issues. I think in the current situation, the Indian government, especially with DPI, et cetera, has a lot more experience digitally than many other governments. But at that point, I can tell you that between the US and Europe, we had big gaps. Second, it was important to develop some rules and standards that both sides could agree to. And each country is, wants to have their own rules and standards. And in the US, for example, there isn't even one standard-setting body. There are a plethora of bodies that set standards. So how do you harmonize all these standards across countries? These were the three big issues: capabilities, rules and standards, and harmonization. Now, I think in the US-India case, there's an opportunity to harmonize in the era of AI and build that trust, the trusted corridor that is often spoken about. And I think that's an area that I think if both governments make as a priority, the synergies between the development systems in both countries will be significantly enhanced.
Right. Abhishek, your sole LP, if I'm not incorrect, is a company, a single company, Aramco, out of Saudi Arabia, right? So as you're investing the money here and elsewhere, how do you view AI for profit versus AI for good?
Yeah, it's very similar. Again, the way we look at this is there are some ethos where you start with. There are fundamental things broader which are good for humanity, which is where you start with. We don't invest in things which, there's a reason we don't go after media and entertainment, and you can debate whether it is good or bad for humanity. But there are, we focus mostly on the infrastructure side. And, as I mentioned in my previous remarks, it's both sides are of the same coin, which is, and let me give an example. Company like Grok with a Q, which is an AI inference chip company, which we are an investor in. The whole idea is they do super fast inference. If you do super fast inference, obviously you burn less energy. If you burn less energy, it is broadly for the greater good. So if you have fundamental breakthroughs in the technology, which Surya was talking about, like Transformers War and what some of the other architectures are coming around with, you create an amazing opportunity, an amazing economic opportunity, but then you also create an opportunity to do things which were never possible before. Within the AI construct, I think, as was rightly said by the team, it is a quest around energy, and it's a quest around data, which is why you see it develop very differently from how internet developed. Almost every nation on the planet, including the kingdom, including India, including US, want to be ahead. There is a sovereign AI strategy. When was the last time we thought about a sovereign strategy around a technology? Because fundamentally, if you think about this, the last time none of us were here was when you could create energy, when you could transform energy into physical work, was James Watt's. And now you have an opportunity to convert energy into pure intelligence. Why won't you want more of it? And that's the construct which we believe in.
Fantastic. And Surya, you've been at Stanford, I think, for at least a decade or more. So what is academia doing in terms of responsible AI? Are there processes, frameworks, methodologies that research people like you are thinking of to help industry and startups?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the basic things is explainability, right? AI is a very funny technology in the sense that it's amazing, but it makes errors, some percentage of the time, where that percentage could be 5% or more. Imagine an airplane that 5% or even 1% of the time could crash. You'd never get into that airplane, right? And for many cases, you actually need that level of reliability. So thinking about why AI makes errors, working on explainable AI, opening the black box, sharing our scientific understanding with the world in a way that everybody can build upon our scientific understanding, not hiding it behind closed doors and big frontier lab companies. So for example, I taught a class on explainable AI this quarter, and there was an incredible interest from students and even professors to come to the course to develop a fundamental scientific understanding of what these things are doing, using that scientific understanding to rationally debug these systems and improve them. That kind of work is best done out in the open in academia. We are also actually, at the Human-Centered AI Institute, we also have a portfolio of research across everything from new AI inspired by biological intelligence to augmenting humans with AI, and also to understand and guide the impact of AI in society through policy. And so we've been working with the government, we've been bringing in congressional staff to educate them about AI, convening a whole bunch of players across the field. And so we're kind of, the university is kind of a full stack, very interdisciplinary, wide community of people that can look at AI from technology to societal impact. And I think that's its value. I think I love being at Stanford as opposed to going to industry because I can talk to people from across the entire university, from scientists to social scientists to economists and so forth. And just having that broad portfolio of people thinking about this problem, I think is very important and exciting.
Thank you. Sumir, you know the Indian market probably better than any of us. In terms of now the GCCs, the Global Capability Centers, every day there's a new one opening, right? Every Fortune 500 company has a center and so on and so forth. So how do you view the Indian market in terms of are Indian founders and others as knowledgeable about responsibility as the US is? Where do you think the maturity is in that space?
Yeah, certainly, MR. I think, firstly, on the GCC trend you mentioned, it is absolutely stunning what's going on in India. It's stunning even us. I mean, today, if you look at many large, iconic American companies, what's stunning is their single largest employee base is India. I believe that's true for Morgan Stanley. I believe that's true for American Express. I believe that's true for many companies. And the reason is simple. It's just that India has a really deep pool of very talented people. We're obviously the world's largest country by population, exceeded China, and the world's youngest country with 50% of the population below the age of 18. So given those stats, it's just an incredibly deep pool, deeper than anywhere else in the world of talent. And that talent is available at very reasonable prices. So for the GCs, I mean, the sort of American companies have been very smart to enter India aggressively. The GCCs are hiring like crazy. When I talk to my friends who are headhunters in India, that's a number one client, all the GCCs hiring senior people in India and scaling up. And what's interesting is they've evolved, MR. So they started out doing, low-level testing and software, maintenance software, and then now it's software coding, and now actually across all functions in the enterprise. And so they're increasingly becoming more intelligent and playing more of they're still a subservient role to the US or to the multinational, but I'd say increasingly more of a partner role and more a strategic role. And I think that's the evolution of the GCCs in India. And vis-a-vis AI in particular and responsible AI, I don't see them playing a very big role in that so far. That may change, but I think today they're mostly providing huge leverage to these organizations. I do think there's some risk to the GCCs due to AI for different reasons, that a lot of low-end jobs will get replaced due to AI. And so the GCCs and Indian IT services faces a huge risk from AI from that perspective. But today they're not really big players in defining, I would say, responsible AI, frankly.
Thank you. Neeraj, your take on startups in India, are you seeing them, you've invested quite a bit after WhatsApp. Are you seeing metrics and other things going around responsibility and equity and inclusiveness in the startup community there?
So yeah, I think I've been investing in India for the last, say, 10 years or so. I had my own fund, and then we merged that with General Catalyst last year. So we have a team in India that now runs General Catalyst with me. And we've invested in around 100 companies, small and big, over the last 10 years. We continue to invest a lot from General Catalyst. We have one fund that invests across US, Europe, and India. Very bullish on the Indian ecosystem. I'm sure all of you are aware of all the IPOs that are happening in India. And so I think it has really shown that there is maturity coming into the ecosystem, right? You can not only find really early, smart young founders and back them at the earliest stages, but you can really create enduring companies in India now, right? So that's a huge positive, right? When 10 years back, when I started investing in India, the question was always about like, okay, you can find amazing people and they have great ideas, but can they build large, globally competitive companies? And I think that promise has been fulfilled, I would say, and will continue to scale from here on, right? So for us, I think India is not another market that we invested. It is one of the main markets that we invest in at General Catalyst, right? The learnings have been that India has to be looked at with a different lens. You cannot invest in India and look at India with the same lens you look at the US, right? The conditions are different, the problems are different. Even if one of our portfolio companies from the US has to go up, sell in India, they have to think differently about how do they apply their products in India, right? So having teams in different parts of the world, in the US, in Europe, and India, gives us that capability to really help not only get our American companies to go into India and scale them, but also learn a lot from how they have built their products. And all of these firms here that we back in the US have senior folks who are Indians, right? And they often help us invest in the next generation of founders out of India, right? So we have seen that there's a huge synergies between, especially in India, US. A lot of our companies that we've invested in India have actually moved to the US, and they're scaling in the US because their market is in the US, right? So we see companies from the US going to India and partnering with our companies there. We see companies in India getting started that we have funded that have moved to the US, right? So overall, I think we are extremely happy with how things have been. On the AI sides, particularly, I think things as Sumir said, has been a little slower for us so far. But I think that's where I think all of us getting together and talking about it and working closely with the government and policymakers to really figure out what should be India's role in this new world, right? As Sumir said, that we have the amazing deep pool of talent in India. There's no shortage of amazing people. They're really smart, young, hungry. But can we really empower them to go after problems that not only like create products and solutions for India, but can really become globally competitive, big, large, enduring companies over the years, right? That's our goal, to really help find that talent and empower and back them and help them scale and create huge companies.
Thanks. Arun, your firm, Celesta, is doing deep tech investments in India. So it goes beyond AI, right? You're doing semiconductors. So how do you view that whole ecosystem in terms of responsibility, ethics, geopolitical risks? Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, if I might just say very briefly, anything that you do in advanced manufacturing or semiconductors in India actually addresses geopolitical risk indirectly, because today India has a huge dependence on imports, and a lot of that comes from China. So that automatically, and we look for opportunities that are not just import substitution, but that can be globally competitive. I want to pick up on a point that was just made, which is that, in India, data is going to be a major asset. And to some extent, it's much harder to get data in the US than in India for all kinds of valid reasons. But what we find is that companies that are looking to build value on data are able to get a head start in India. So for example, if you want to get access to a bunch of cancer patients in Tata Memorial Hospital, you quickly get them and you can try out your diagnostics on them. Whereas here, the hurdles are very high. So in a sense, the unformed regulations in some areas in India offer a great opportunity for US-India companies to take advantage of.
Right. Abhishek, you do more investing. AI is one segment, right? You also do infrastructure, robotics. How do you see AI playing a role in the overall space? Because we've not talked about robotics, because it's going to be a key part of AI.
Yeah, so I think there's a boom. There's a reason why the highest market cap company happens to be a silicon company now. There's a boom. Everybody keeps reading about this. The race is on in terms of building out the infrastructure, and we invest quite substantially in every aspect of it. In fact, along a bunch of companies with Celesta across silicon and other layers. And that is happening across the world. Nobody wants to stay behind. Including the kingdom, including in India, we have an opportunity where people are looking to not just advance, but to leapfrog what was done in the last 20 years in terms of building a hyperscaler from start, using AI, but across the entire stack. And what that means is people are looking at investing in every aspect of that infrastructure and taking risk. That taking risk at that scale, we had not seen that before. And therein lies the opportunity for us as venture capitalists. So whether it is robotics, whether it is boring things like interconnect, you saw the acquisition by Marvell. We have a bunch of interconnect companies. They are doing some really cool stuff, but now they are scaling at levels which we never imagined. There are companies in our portfolio such as Together, along with General Catalyst, which are scaling. Like all my ideas when I was learning venture capital from different people on how companies scale, what is an enterprise sales model, those are all out of the window. We are in a completely new world. And that's how we think about, when we invest as well. We come in with a long-term patient capital. I don't have to go out, raise funds every 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. If we do our job right, my next 10 funds are almost guaranteed with an unlimited amount of capital. What does that help me? It helps me sit down in front of the entrepreneur and have a conversation. I'm going to be your long-term partner and really mean it. If you're going after a really deep tech problem, if you're going after a really hairy problem, there are very few people who will stand behind you at the finish line. We'll be one of those.
Fantastic. Surya, coming to you on the academic side. So what are some of the new research ideas that are percolating at Stanford and other academic institutions?
Yeah, there's so many of them. I mean, one of them, one thing that we did recently is again, going back to these diffusion models, they can imagine new things. They're infinitely creative, it seems like. How are they doing that, right? We came up with very simple explanations that could explain where the creativity of these diffusion models could come from. Digital twins of the brain, I mentioned, accelerating neuroscience discovery from decades to months. I mean, that's incredibly exciting. Mathematical reasoning, right? These things are winning the gold medal in the Olympiad and so forth. How are they doing that? How can we improve that? One thing we found recently is that these language models are created in 2 different stages, right? You pre-train them to predict the next word on the internet at large scale, then you fine-tune them, and then you do reinforcement learning and so forth. They have these multiple scales, and the frontier model companies organize their teams around the pre-training team, the post-training team, and so forth. But you can ask, can you do better by co-designing these processes? And we showed that you can actually, which suggests that maybe the way that the frontier models companies are organized is suboptimal. Unless the post-training team and the pre-training team are jointly choosing their design choices, they're not going to do as well as they could. They're leaving performance gains on the table. Going back to actually responsible innovation, one thing that I forgot to mention is that when we award money within Stanford through internal seed grants that we raise through philanthropy, we actually have an ethics review section of every single seed grant. So if you're going to work on technology advances, you better think about the ethics of what's going to come out, like what will be the impact on humans, on society, and so forth. And we actually have a separate ethics review board that reviews that, and it's the joint technical assessment and ethical assessment that's combined to decide whether or not we fund that. And actually, interestingly, at General Catalyst, we actually do something similar. For every investment memo that we have a responsible innovation section that discusses, is this innovation responsible? What could be its upstream and downstream costs for society and so forth? So that's very much part of the investing strategy there. I think incorporating the joint understanding of technology and impact on society will be absolutely essential for AI, both in India and the US and everywhere.
Great. I'm now going to go to the Vinod question. Vinod was our opening keynote, made some provocative remarks. A couple of things that stood out between now and 2030, I think he said education will be virtually free. I think he also said healthcare questions will be, doctors will be basically free. So any thoughts on some of your predictions or ideas, pros or cons to what Vinod is thinking? Who wants to start?
I think one thing which I'll say, and this was very interesting for us. We typically don't look at healthcare, but we have made some investments there. What Vinod said was absolutely on point. Let's start with healthcare. Democratizing healthcare access, that is happening, and there is a lot of build out. You'll have radiologist on your ChatGPT, so on and so forth. But where it really hits for us, for example, was going after diseases which were non-economical, which people would fail to, or big companies would never even go after. Neurological disorders is one which was mentioned. In fact, our company, Greenstone, which is a Stanford company, going after some of these rare diseases is now possible. You can create those experiments, you can go after those things. So the opportunity which never existed, one is the scale, and that I completely agree with, and that is going to completely change the world, yes. But then there is this equalization piece, which we forget, and I think that is coming our way in terms of, even if the subset of an individual having that rare disease is one, guess what? It will be possible to go treat that person.
Fantastic.
I think
Neeraj?
I'll just stay on healthcare for a little bit, because at General Catalyst, we invest a lot in healthcare. And I think we believe that we will go from the era of shortages to the era of abundance with AI. And I can give you an example. We have a company called Hippocratic AI, which was started with safety-first healthcare LLMs. That was the goal. And the first application of that is that they built something called agentic nurse, right? Today, there's a huge shortage of nurses in the US because nurses are expensive. It's difficult to scale nurses, right? Usually costs $90 an hour. It's a very critical part of your healthcare operations, right? Can you create a system, an agentic nurse, that can really help a patient post-operation? And you can talk to, you can get advice, you can, there's no shortage of it because you have an infinite sort of supply of an agentic nurse, right? So just one example of how, if we do AI responsibly into these critical sectors, you can go from an era of shortages to an era of abundance. And I think healthcare is just one example of it. I think it will start modernizing and changing all of these critical sectors across healthcare, defense, manufacturing, energy, and how an enterprise works. Like if you today look at an enterprise, you have all these functions like marketing and HR and finance. We have companies that are building AI platforms for each one of these functions. And if you look at an enterprise of the future, you will have, obviously you will have humans working in an enterprise, but they will also have agents helping each one of those humans in making their work better, faster. So think about the productivity that will change, that will happen, right? Once you have AI diffused in all these areas, you will have abundance of resources to go solve problems that it took either longer to solve or were very difficult to solve. So, yeah.
Sumir?
Yeah, I would like to echo what Neeraj and Abhishek were saying on healthcare and then make a generalization as well. I think on the healthcare front, I'll just share a very anecdotal example. My parents have a wonderful doctor. She's pretty smart. She went to Harvard. She went to Stanford Medical School, so probably knows her stuff. She's really good. I recently got a diagnosis for my parents through her, and then I spent time on ChatGPT, and I have to tell you guys, the ChatGPT stuff just anecdotally was amazing. We covered so many more areas actually there, and this is probably one of the best doctors here in the Bay Area, right? And so I think you're seeing, I've anecdotally seen it, was having we have a very nice investment company called Innovasa, which has done a great job building AI for hospital systems. I was talking to a C-level exec at one of their dinners from a large hospital system. He was saying in the internal trials, the LLMs are doing a much better job than many of their doctors. They don't want to talk about it openly, but I think what Neeraj is talking about, or Abhishek's talking about, has happened already. And that's why many of us are consulting LLMs for medical advice, because it's actually, it can be completely wrong. I also agree with Surya, once in a while it can be completely wrong. So obviously you have to speak to a real doctor, but it's stunningly good, you know, and it's getting better. The second thing I'll say at a more general level is just echoing what Vinod said, is I think in the long term, there's no question, in my view, that we're going to see a massive revolution in work through AI. What's hard to predict is the exact timing of it. And I just look at it as an example of it. Look at self-driving, right? Self-driving was touted as something that was going to happen. 15 years ago, people said it's going to happen in 5 years. It turned out to be a much harder problem than anyone thought. And it cost a few more $1 billion to solve it. Now it's actually pretty solved. Now actually self-driving is there, right? Waymo's got 25% market share in San Francisco. It's probably going to, self-driving is probably going to take over the US. 1 million Uber drivers will probably be unemployed in America over the next 5 to 10 years. That's almost a certainty, right? So I think many technologies evolve that way, and I expect AI to be the same, that there'll be some very optimistic predictions on timing that may not be entirely correct, yeah. But in the long term, they'll be more than correct, you know, and self-driving is a good example of that playing out.
I think everyone here, including the CG, would say self-driving in India would be fantastic for all of us.
Anyone can do that is a miracle. We'd love to invest.
Arun, I know you've done a lot of work in India, so what do you think of Vinod's comments today?
I like Vinod's comments. I like the optimism. I like the potential that he laid out. But I think there's some areas that we should think about when you think about AI that are societal and quite important. For example, will it exacerbate the digital divide, or will it, go the other way? There's no reason to think that it will not, unless education, et cetera, make up for it. Other is, will it lead to, people giving up their individual thinking abilities and depending on others' opinions or AI-imposed opinions? Can there be more manipulation of societies, et cetera? I think there are many, many serious questions that we have to address when you have technologies that can be centrally dispersed rapidly. What does that do to democracy? So I think there's lots to be thought about.
Surya?
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said. By the way, I read Hippocratic's patents as part of due diligence, and it's an incredibly beautiful agentic AI system that's getting very safe and so forth. I think AI is incredibly good at, for example, medical diagnoses and so forth. It's great at any system where there's a huge breadth of knowledge that it has to search over and surface relatively shallow facts. But one thing that we did, I'm a physicist, so I got together with 9 other condensed matter physics labs, and we really decided to test the knowledge of 17 different AI systems by adversarially testing them, by trying to come up with problems that these AI systems could not solve. If we gave it any esoteric problem that was solved even in a single paper in the 1970s, we know a lot of esoteric problems, it could solve them, no problem. But if we added just simple twists that are non-standard, that wouldn't show up in any textbook or anything like that, and we could all come up with such twists relatively easily, couldn't solve any of them, 0%, right? There were certain classes of problems where like 17 LLMs, every single one got 0% correct. So these systems are still not, they don't actually have fundamental understanding in the same way that expert humans do. So you can look up the paper, it's called a Condensed Matter Physics Benchmark by expert researchers. And I suspect that this is true across multiple domains if you adversarially test them. Of course, a generic person asking about basic level knowledge, you'll get a great answer, and you can monetize that, it'll be fantastic. But there's a lot more to do there. And I think we're actually on the wrong path to having AI have fundamental, deep understanding. So when people were talking about scientific expertise being free, I actually wasn't that worried based on what I've seen about adversarially testing these AI systems. The final thing will be human taste. Like, what is the right question to ask? What is the right problem to solve? I think that ultimately must be left up to humanity, not to AI, because we're solving problems for ourselves. And AI doesn't really know what society needs at the moment. It may get better at that, but that's very important for us to think about.
Fantastic. Closing question for all of you. This is the curtain raiser to the AI summit in February in India, right? And you can tell from the session so far, there are two undisputed leaders in AI, China and the US. Right now, it looks like the US is definitely leading, but China could be leading or close behind. So what is India's role in AI? That's one. And second, what should the AI summit take up on as a topic for discussion and resolution in February, right? So what is India's role and what is one key topic to be discussed in February? Who wants to start? Neeraj?
Yeah. So I think India can totally take leadership in areas where they've been really traditionally been strong. And I'll give you an example, right? Indian companies have done really well in services, IT services, right? They've built $100 billion companies over the last 3-4 decades, right? Given the propensity of the density of talent that we have in India and how well we understand the sector, there's an opportunity to create an AI-first, AI-native IT services company. I think things like these, where India has traditionally been very good at and has an unfair advantage, I think we should figure out ways to create companies in those areas where, you know, the West is not really focused or China is not really focused on. So that's just one example. I think two, as I said earlier, it is all about global resilience, and we have to figure out how to create resilience in India across all the sectors, right? What that means is the whole stack from infrastructure to models to applications. We have to really think about in the next few years, if there's all these American companies and Chinese companies, if they want to prevent their technologies to go to other parts of the world, what will that do to India, right? So it's always good to start investing across the whole stack and start figuring out. For example, we have a company in India called Sarvam, which is investing in models for India, very specific Indic languages and small models and things that work on the phones, right? So how do we encourage and back and empower more of these things to happen so that India over the long term is resilient to any kind of geopolitical changes in AI?
I'll just add, probably take a different angle on this. I think a lot of us who grew up in India, one of the main strengths for Indians have always been the multicultural aspect, multilingual aspect, and that is kind of almost missing from the Western side as the AI started evolving. And as you go back to the drawing board, or as you think about scaling this up, I think India's unique angle there is using this multicultural aspect, understanding of that, most importantly, removing biases across, and then also adding and preserving culture. Because I think 100 years from now, people are not going to excavate textbooks out and figure out what the culture was. If you go on the current path of GPT-4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the individual identities of the cultures are going to eventually start to fade away. And that's where there's a unique opportunity for India to say, this is how we preserve that, this is how we secure that, and this is how we remove biases. If India takes that opportunity, it not only addresses a huge market within India, but guess what? That is the problem statement which most of us are going to come to in another 10 years.
Sumir, quickly, and Arun and Surya before we finish up.
Yeah, I would say two things I feel we can do, MR. I think one is from the Indian government's perspective, I think there should be a huge push. There's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get some of our smartest minds from the US, professors, PhDs, others, back to India, invest heavily in R&D. And I think we haven't really seen the government do that yet. I'm hoping they will do that. Because obviously with the Trump funding cuts of universities, many universities have done layoffs. And it's tough if you're a PhD to see your way to becoming a professor over here. So why not do a huge reverse brain drain, get a lot of our top talent in AI back? I think it's possible. Make an effort. I think the second thing I would say is I like what the government is doing in deep tech. They started a fund to encourage, support a lot of funds and kind of encourage that. And I would add much more of an AI flavor to that. Those are two things I think the government can do to help India win in AI long term and be in a stronger position.
Great. Arun?
Yeah, I totally agree with the first point that Sumir made, also the second, but the first one is a very important one. I think China is doing this in a big way. It's a great opportunity to get the top talent back to India and make them flourish. Second point I'd make is really what Vinod talked about AI as a part of the data India stack. I think that's an opportunity for India to have a leadership role in the global south with technology by propagating a more full-fledged India stack.
Surya?
Yeah, three short things. So I was actually at the White House at the National Security Council, and that was my audience. So actually to play at that audience to go against some of the anti-immigrant sentimentality and anti-funding sentimentality in the US, I told the National Security Council we beat our adversaries by draining their brains, right? And that's how America has succeeded. There's absolutely no reason that India can't do the same. India should capitalize on the reductions in science funding in the US to try to attract the Indian diaspora back, and even attract American professors to spend time there. I would love to spend time there. I was born there. It's wonderful. Second, I was incredibly excited by the AI mission that Abhishek was talking about with Indian data sets. There's a treasure trove of uniquely Indian data that will not be gathered by the West. Making that available would be very impactful, like making the great Indian literature easily digestible by AI would be incredibly impactful. And yeah, that's
great. Thank you. Before I finish, I just want to thank Consul General Shrikar Reddy and his team for partnering with Indiaspora and for choosing so many Indiaspora members as speakers, including Arun, Sumir, previous panel had Pradeep. We have Varun Sivaram, Shankar Trivedi, Srinivas, Vishal Sikka, and many others in our community. We're happy to participate and get this mission going to February. And Abhishek and Namgya, thank you so much for being here as well. And thanks to all the 5 eminent panelists.
Thank you.